The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in July 1881, and Elena Everett's hands trembled as she read the words that would shatter her world into 1,000 pieces. Her father had promised her to Marcus Thornhill, a railroad magnate from Boston she had never met, never spoken to, never even seen a photograph of, and the wedding was set for 6 weeks from now. The paper crinkled between her fingers as she stood in the doorway of their modest home on the edge of Salida, Colorado, watching dust devils spin across the dried earth, feeling her future collapse like a house of cards in a mountain wind. She was 22 years old enough to have formed her own dreams, her own hopes for what love might look like, and now her father was trading her away like livestock to settle a business debt. The letter explained it all in cold, efficient language. Her father had borrowed money to expand his mining operation 3 years ago when silver prices were high. Then the market crashed, the mine produced less than expected, and Marcus Thornhill had purchased the debt. The price for forgiveness was simple and cruel: Elena's hand in marriage. She walked through the house in a daze, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floors her mother had once polished until they gleamed. Her mother had died 2 winters ago from pneumonia, and Elena had been running the household ever since, cooking and cleaning and managing the accounts while her father spent longer and longer hours at the failing mine. She had thought they were managing, scraping by but surviving. She had not known about the debt, about the threat hanging over their heads like an executioner's blade. When her father came home that evening, his face was gray with exhaustion and something else. Shame, perhaps, or resignation. He would not meet her eyes as he hung his hat on the peg by the door. "You read the letter," he said. "It was not a question. How could you?" Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "How could you promise me to a stranger without even asking?" "I had no choice." Her father moved to the window, staring out at the mountains that ringed their valley. "He would have taken everything. The house, the mine, everything. We would be on the street. So instead you are selling me." "It is not like that," but his voice lacked conviction. "Marcus Thornhill is a wealthy man. You will have security, comfort, everything you could want. Except love. Except choice. Except any say in my own life." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. "Mother would be ashamed of you." Her father flinched as if she had struck him, and for a moment she saw the broken man beneath the stern facade. But then his jaw hardened. "It is done, Elena. The agreement is signed. You will marry Marcus Thornhill in 6 weeks, and that is the end of it." He left the room, and Elena heard his bedroom door close with a finality that echoed through the empty house. She stood alone in the gathering darkness, feeling the walls closing in around her, wondering if this was how a trap felt to a wild animal. Caught with no way out, facing a future that looked like a cage, she did not sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed listening to the wind rattle the shutters and thinking about Boston, about cold winters and colder marriages, about spending the rest of her life with a man who had purchased her like property. The thought made her skin crawl and her stomach twist with nausea. There had to be another way. There had to be. The next morning she rose before dawn and dressed in her riding clothes. She needed air, needed space, needed to think anywhere but inside that house with her father's betrayal hanging heavy in every room. She saddled her mare, Clover, and rode out toward the Arkansas River, following the trails she had known since childhood. The summer sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink and gold when she reached her favorite spot, a bend in the river where cottonwoods grew thick and the water ran clear over smooth stones. She dismounted and sat on a fallen log, watching the river flow past with an indifference that felt almost cruel. The world kept turning, the water kept flowing, and her life was about to end before it had truly begun. "Bit early for contemplating," a voice said behind her, and Elena jumped to her feet, her heart hammering. A man stood at the edge of the trees, leading a paint horse by the reins. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty trail clothes and a worn leather vest, and there was something in his posture that spoke of long days in the saddle and nights under open stars. He held up one hand in apology. "Did not mean to startle you, miss. Saw your horse and wanted to make sure everything was all right." Not many folks out this early. Elena's pulse slowly returned to normal as she studied him. She had seen him around town once or twice, she thought, but they had never been formally introduced. "I am fine. Just needed some quiet. I know the feeling." He tied his horse to a low branch and moved to the river's edge, keeping a respectful distance. "Mind if I water my horse? Been riding since before sunrise." "It is a free river," Elena said, sitting back down on her log. She watched as he led his horse to drink, noting the easy confidence in his movements, the way he spoke quietly to the animal. There was something calming about his presence, something that made the knot in her chest loosen just slightly. "You are the Everett girl, are you not?" he said after a moment. "Elena, right? I am Samuel Wright. Work as a hand at the Johnson Ranch, though I pick up work where I can find it. Saw you in town a few times." "Elena," she confirmed. "I remember you now. You helped old Mrs. Patterson load her wagon last month when her back was troubling her." Seemed like the right thing to do. He looked at her more closely, and something in his expression shifted. "Are you certain you are all right? You look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders." She meant to brush off his concern, to maintain the polite distance strangers kept in casual conversation. But something about the genuine kindness in his eyes, the lack of judgment in his tone, made the words spill out before she could stop them. "My father has promised me in marriage to a man I have never met, a business arrangement to settle a debt. I am to be married in 6 weeks and move to Boston, and I have no say in the matter whatsoever." Samuel's expression darkened. "That is barbaric. You cannot just trade a person like property." "Apparently you can," Elena laughed bitterly. "My father signed the agreement. It is done." "Nothing is done until you say your vows," Samuel said firmly. He moved closer, settling onto a rock a few feet away. "Have you thought about refusing, about just saying no?" "Of course I have. But my father says we will lose everything if I do not go through with it. The house, the mine, all of it. He will be destitute. Better destitute than sacrificing his daughter." Samuel's voice held an edge of anger. "What kind of man does that? A desperate one." Elena found herself defending her father despite everything, perhaps out of habit, perhaps because some part of her understood even if she could not forgive. "He is not cruel, just broken. The mine failed, my mother died, and he has been drowning ever since. This seemed like his only way out." "There is always another way." Samuel picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands. "You could write to this Marcus Thornhill. Tell him you will not marry him, that the agreement was made without your consent and you refuse to honor it. He would still demand repayment." "My father does not have the money." "Then your father loses the mine. Maybe that is what needs to happen. Maybe he needs to face the consequences of his choices instead of forcing you to bear them." Samuel looked at her directly, his gray eyes serious. "A mine can be replaced. A life cannot. Your life, your future, your chance at happiness. Those are worth more than any amount of silver in the ground." Elena felt something crack open inside her chest, some small seed of possibility. "You really think I should write to him? Tell him no?" "I think you should tell him exactly how you feel, that you are not property to be bought and sold, that you are a human being with your own will, your own heart, your own dreams, And if he has any decency at all, he will tear up that agreement and find some other way to collect what he is owed. I do not know if I could find the right words, Elena said slowly. I have never been good with formal letters. Samuel smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger, lighter. Then let me help you. I am pretty fair with words when I need to be. We can write it together, make sure it says exactly what you need it to say. You would do that. For someone you barely know. Seems like the right thing to do, he echoed his earlier words. Besides, I've always had a hard time standing by when something unjust is happening. Gets me in trouble sometimes, but I cannot seem to help it. Elena found herself smiling for the first time since the letter arrived. When could we do it? How about today? I have the afternoon free. There is a spot in town, the back room at the general store. Mrs. Chen lets folks use it for meetings and such. We could work there, have some privacy and a proper table. You have thought this through quickly. Some things do not need much thinking. They are just right. Samuel stood and offered his hand. What do you say, Elena Everett? Ready to take control of your own life? She looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong, offering not just help but hope. She thought about Boston, about Marcus Thornhill, about a future mapped out by someone else's choices. Then she thought about her mother, who had always told her to be brave, to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. Elena placed her hand in Samuel's and let him pull her to her feet. Let us write that letter. They rode back to town together, their horses side by side on the dusty trail. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning coolness and painting the valley in shades of gold and green. Samuel told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 19, about drifting north and west looking for work, and a place that felt like home. Elena talked about her mother, about the books she loved to read, about her dream of maybe running a school someday where girls could learn mathematics and literature and have choices about their futures. That is a fine dream, Samuel said. You would be good at it. I can tell you have a teaching heart. How can you tell that, the way you talk about things, patient and clear, like you want people to understand, not just hear you talking? He glanced at her with a slight smile. Plus, you have not once made me feel foolish, and I left school when I was 12 to work the ranch. A lot of educated folks look down on that. Education comes in many forms, Elena said. You know things about horses and cattle and surviving on your own that I could never learn from a book. That is valuable too, see. Teaching heart. Mrs. Chen was delighted to let them use the back room, though her eyes sparkled with curiosity at seeing Elena and Samuel together. She brought them paper and ink and a pot of strong coffee, then discreetly returned to the front of the store to give them privacy. Samuel pulled out a chair for Elena at the small table, then settled across from her. All right, let us start with what you want to say. Do not worry about making it proper yet. Just tell me what is in your heart. Elena stared at the blank paper for a long moment, then began to speak. I want to tell him that I am not a commodity, that I have thoughts and feelings and dreams. That I deserve to marry someone I choose, someone I love, not someone who bought me like a horse. Good. Samuel dipped the pen in ink and began to write in a surprisingly elegant hand. What else? That my father had no right to make this agreement without my consent. That I am of legal age and sound mind, and I refuse to honor a contract I never agreed to. The words came faster now, fueled by anger and hurt and a growing sense of her own power. That if he truly needs the money, he can take the mine, take the house, take everything except me. Because I am not his to take. Samuel wrote quickly, his brow furrowed in concentration. This is strong. This is exactly what you need to say. What about your father? Do you want to mention him specifically? Elena hesitated. I do not want to be cruel. Despite everything, he is still my father. But I want Marcus Thornhill to know that this was not my choice, that I was never consulted. We can say that you have recently learned of the arrangement, that it was made without your knowledge or consent, and that you cannot in good conscience proceed with a marriage based on coercion rather than mutual affection. Samuel looked up from the paper. How does that sound? Perfect. You have a way with words, Samuel Wright. I read a lot in the evenings, not much else to do in the bunkhouse. He kept writing, occasionally pausing to find the right phrase. Should we suggest an alternative, some other way to settle the debt? What alternative is there? My father is broke. The mine itself, even if it is not producing much now, it still has value. Thornhill could take ownership, hire proper management, maybe turn it around. At least he would have a tangible asset instead of a forced bride. Elena nodded slowly. That makes sense. And it takes the burden off both me and my father. Thornhill gets something of value, just not me. They worked for over an hour, crafting and refining the letter until every word felt right. Samuel's suggestions were thoughtful and intelligent, his phrasing respectful but firm. He seemed to instinctively understand the balance Elena needed to strike between asserting her rights and not needlessly antagonizing a powerful man. Finally, they had a finished draft. Samuel read it aloud, his voice steady and clear. Mr. Thornhill, I am writing to inform you that I cannot proceed with the marriage arrangement made between you and my father. I only recently learned of this agreement, and it was made entirely without my knowledge or consent. While I understand that my father owes you a significant debt, I cannot in good conscience enter into a marriage based on financial coercion rather than mutual affection and respect. I am a human being with my own will and my own life to lead, not property to be traded in settlement of debts. I respectfully but firmly decline this arrangement. As an alternative solution to my father's debt, I suggest you take ownership of the mine itself. While it is currently underperforming, with proper management and investment, it may yet prove profitable. This would provide you with a tangible asset of real value. I wish you well in your business endeavors, but I cannot and will not marry you. Respectfully, Elena Everett. Tears pricked Elena's eyes as she listened. The letter was everything she needed to say, all the anger and hurt and determination put into words that could not be misunderstood. It is perfect. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you so much. You did the hard part. You found the courage to say no. He handed her the pen. Now you just need to copy it in your own hand and send it off. Elena carefully copied the letter onto fresh paper, her handwriting neat and precise despite her shaking hands. When she finished, she folded it carefully and sealed it with wax. The weight of it in her hands felt both terrifying and liberating. What if he refuses? She asked quietly. What if he demands I honor the agreement anyway? Then you still refuse. You can only make you do something you are determined not to do by force, and even a man like Thornhill would not want the scandal of a forced marriage. It would ruin his reputation. Samuel reached across the table and briefly touched her hand, a gesture of comfort and support. You are doing the right thing, Elena. No matter what happens next, you are standing up for yourself. That takes real strength. I do not feel strong, I feel terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite the fear. He smiled at her. You are one of the bravest people I have met. They walked together to the post office, and Elena handed the letter to the clerk with instructions to send it express to Boston. It would arrive in a week or so, and then there would be nothing to do but wait for a response and deal with her father's reaction, her father. Elena's stomach clenched at the thought of telling him what she had done. But Samuel was right. This was her life, and she had to fight for it. Would you like me to be there when you tell your father? Samuel asked as they stood outside the post office. "Not to speak for you, but just for support." "That is kind, but I think this is something I need to do alone. He is my father and I need to face him myself." Elena looked at Samuel, really looked at him, taking in his kind eyes and strong features and the gentle set of his mouth. "But thank you for everything. I do not know what I would have done without your help today. You would have figured it out. You are stronger than you think." Samuel touched the brim of his hat. "I should get back to the ranch, but if you need anything, anything at all, you can find me at the Johnson place, or leave a message at the general store. Mrs. Chen always knows where everyone is." "I will remember that." She watched him ride away, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and something else, something warmer and more complicated. She barely knew Samuel Wright, had spent only a few hours in his company, but already she felt more understood by him than by anyone else in her life. He had listened to her, truly listened, and helped her find her own voice without trying to speak for her. That was a rare gift. The ride home felt shorter than usual, or maybe Elena was just dreading her arrival. The sun was past its zenith, painting long shadows across the valley, and her father's horse was tied outside the house. He was home early, which was unusual. Perhaps he had sensed what was coming. Inside, her father sat at the kitchen table with a glass of whiskey in front of him. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Where have you been?" "Riding, thinking." Elena hung her hat by the door and forced herself to stand tall, and sending a letter to Marcus Thornhill. Her father went very still. "What kind of letter?" "One telling him I will not marry him, that the agreement was made without my consent and I refuse to honor it." The glass shattered in her father's hand, whiskey and blood spreading across the table. He did not seem to notice. "You did what?" "I sent him a letter declining the marriage. I offered him the mine instead as settlement for your debt." Elena's voice shook but held steady. "I am sorry, father, but I cannot do this. I cannot marry a stranger to fix your mistakes." Her father surged to his feet, his chair crashing backward. "You stupid, foolish girl. Do you have any idea what you have done? He will ruin us. He will take everything. Then let him take everything. At least I will still have my life, my freedom, my chance at a future I choose." Elena stood her ground even as her father advanced on her. "You had no right to promise me without asking. I am not your property. I am your father. You will do as I say. I am 22 years old and of legal age. I will not." Elena felt tears streaming down her face now but did not wipe them away. "Mother would never have let you do this. She would have fought for me, and since she is gone, I have to fight for myself." Her father stopped as if she had struck him. The anger drained from his face, leaving only exhaustion and defeat. "Your mother." He sat back down heavily, cradling his bleeding hand. "Your mother would have left me years ago if she had known what I would become." Elena fetched bandages and gently wrapped her father's hand, the familiar motions of caretaking easing some of the tension between them. "She loved you. She never would have left. She loved a better man than I turned out to be." Her father stared at his bandaged hand. "When did I become the kind of person who would sell his own daughter? You were desperate. People do terrible things when they are desperate." Elena sat down across from him. "But it is not too late to be better, to accept that the mine is lost and find another way forward. There is no other way. Without the mine, I have nothing. I am nothing. You have me, or you could if you stopped trying to trade me away." Elena reached across the table and took his good hand. "We could start over, move somewhere new. I could teach, you could find work. We would survive." Her father shook his head slowly. "You do not understand. The debt is more than just the mine. I use the house as collateral too. If Thornhill demands payment and I cannot give it, we lose everything." "Everything, Elena. We will be on the street." A cold knot formed in Elena's stomach. "You never mentioned the house." I was ashamed. I kept thinking I could turn it around, make the mine profitable again, pay off the debt before anyone had to know. He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. The marriage was supposed to solve everything. Thornhill would forgive the debt, you would have security, and I could keep what little dignity I have left. "There is no dignity in selling your daughter," Elena said quietly. "But there might be in facing the consequences of your choices and building something new." They sat in heavy silence, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, the whiskey soaking into the wood of the table. Elena felt the weight of what she had done settling onto her shoulders. She had acted on principle, on the belief that her freedom was worth more than security, but now she faced the reality of potential homelessness, of losing the only home she had ever known. Still, even with that fear gnawing at her, she did not regret sending the letter. Some things were more important than a roof over your head. Some cages were gilded, but cages nonetheless. "What is done," her father finally said. "Now we wait to see if Thornhill is a reasonable man or a vengeful one. And if he is vengeful, then I will face what comes. You were right about one thing. This is my mistake to answer for, not yours." He stood up slowly, moving like a man 3 times his age. "I am sorry, Elena, for all of it. Your mother deserved better. You deserve better." He left the room, and Elena heard his door close quietly. She sat alone in the kitchen, watching the sun sink lower, wondering what she had set in motion, and whether her courage would prove to be wisdom or folly. The days that followed were strange and tense. Her father went to the mine each day but came home earlier, drinking less, speaking more. They were not comfortable together, not yet, but something had shifted between them. Elena kept house and cooked meals and tried not to think about the letter traveling across the country, about Marcus Thornhill reading her refusal, about what his response might be. 3 days after sending the letter, Elena rode back to the river bend where she had first met Samuel. She had not been able to stop thinking about him, about his kindness and his intelligence, and the way he had helped her without asking for anything in return. Part of her wanted to see him again, to thank him properly, to maybe talk more about the future and what it might hold. She was surprised and pleased to find him there, sitting on the same rock by the river with a book in his hands. He looked up at her approach and smiled, a warm, genuine expression that made her heart skip. "I was hoping you might come back," he said, closing his book and standing. "Been stopping here every morning on my way to work, just in case." "You have?" Elena dismounted and tied Clover to a tree. "Why?" "Wanted to see how you were doing, whether you told your father how he took it, whether you were all right." Samuel moved closer, his eyes searching her face. "You look tired." "I have not been sleeping well, too much on my mind." She told him about the conversation with her father, about the house being part of the collateral, about the waiting. Samuel listened intently, his expression growing darker as she spoke. "So even losing the mine might not be enough. He could take your home too." "Possibly. Probably." Elena sat down on her familiar log. "I keep wondering if I did the right thing, if my principles are worth making us homeless." "Yes," Samuel said firmly, "they are, because what is the alternative? You marry Thornhill, spend the rest of your life with a man who saw you as property, and lose yourself piece by piece trying to be what he wants you to be. That is not living, Elena. That is just a slower kind of death. You sound like you speak from experience." Samuel was quiet for a moment, then sat down beside her, closer than before. "My father tried to choose my life for me, wanted me to stay on the ranch, marry the girl from the neighboring property, raise cattle until I died. She was a nice girl, probably would have been a good wife, but I did not love her. I did not love the ranch. I wanted to see the world, to make my own choices." He picked up a twig and snapped it between his fingers. When I told him no, he said I was dead to him, cut me off completely. I left with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back. Do you regret it? Not for a single day. Was it hard? Yes. Have there been times I went hungry or cold or did not know where my next meal was coming from? Sure, but I have been free. I have made my own way, my own choices, my own mistakes, and I would rather have that than a comfortable cage any day. Elena found her hand had somehow ended up in his, their fingers intertwined. She was not sure which of them had reached for the other first. You are remarkably easy to talk to, Samuel Wright. I could say the same about you, Elena Everett. He looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. I know this probably is not the best timing with everything you have going on, but I need to say it anyway. I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day we met. The way you are brave and scared at the same time. The way you care about doing the right thing even when it costs you. The way you look at the world like it still has good in it despite everything. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Samuel. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other. But sometimes you just know you know. Sometimes you meet someone and it is like everything clicks into place, like you have been waiting for them without even realizing you were waiting. He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense. I am not asking you for anything. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens with Thornhill, whatever you decide about your future, I am here, if you want me to be. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes, but these were different from the tears of anger and fear she had cried over her father's betrayal. These were tears of something like hope, like possibility, like the first green shoots pushing through snow in spring. I have been thinking about you too, she admitted. Probably more than I should, given that my life is currently falling apart, but you make me feel understood. You make me feel like I am not crazy for wanting more than what I was offered. You are not crazy. You are brave. Samuel lifted his free hand and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. And if you will let me, I would like to stand beside you while you figure out what comes next, as a friend, as help, as whatever you need me to be. What if what I need is more than friendship? The words came out before Elena could think better of them, but once they were spoken, she did not want to take them back. What if I want to see where this could go, you and me? Samuel's smile was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. Then I would say I am the luckiest man in Colorado. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Elena did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the possibility of choosing her own love story instead of having one forced upon her. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect, and for just that moment everything else fell away. The debt, the house, Marcus Thornhill, all of it faded into nothing compared to the warmth of Samuel's hand on her face and the rightness of being close to him. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools. That was worth waiting 22 years for, Elena said breathlessly. I am 25 and I completely agree. Samuel rested his forehead against hers. Whatever comes next, we will face it together, all right. All right. They stayed by the river for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Samuel told her about the places he had been, the jobs he had worked, the people he had met on the road. Elena talked about her mother, about the books she had read over and over until the pages fell out, about her dream of teaching and maybe someday having a family of her own. With every word, every shared story, Elena felt the connection between them growing stronger, more certain. When she finally rode home, the sun was high and hot, but she felt lighter than she had in days. Whatever happened with Thornhill, however her father's debt was resolved, she was not alone. She had Samuel, and that made all the difference. 2 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Elena and Samuel met by the river every morning before he went to work. stealing precious hours together before the heat of the day became unbearable. They talked and laughed and kissed like teenagers, and Elena felt herself falling deeper and deeper in love with this kind, thoughtful man who had come into her life at exactly the right moment. Her father noticed the change in her, the lightness in her step, the way she hummed while cooking. He did not ask about it directly, but she saw the questions in his eyes. She was not ready to tell him about Samuel yet. There was still too much unresolved, too much uncertainty about the future. Then, exactly 16 days after Elena sent her letter, the response arrived. Elena's hands shook as she opened the envelope, Samuel standing behind her with one hand on her shoulder. They were at the river, their morning meeting place, and the envelope had been waiting at the post office when she rode through town at dawn. She had not even waited to get home before opening it, needing to know, needing Samuel's support in case the news was bad. The letter was shorter than she expected, written in a sharp, angular hand. Miss Everett, I received your letter with great surprise and, I must admit, a measure of respect. It takes courage to refuse an arrangement that would have provided you with considerable material comfort. While I am disappointed that your father made promises he could not keep, I appreciate your honesty in informing me that you cannot and will not honor this agreement. You are correct that a marriage entered under such circumstances would be neither happy nor honorable. I accept your refusal. Regarding the debt, I have reviewed the situation and concluded that pursuing legal action would cost me more in time and reputation than the debt is worth. I am therefore forgiving the entire amount, both the mine and the house. Consider this my wedding gift to you, Miss Everett, though you will not be marrying me. Perhaps you will find someone more worthy of your independent spirit. I wish you well. Marcus Thornhill. Elena read the letter 3 times before she could believe it. Then she turned to Samuel, and the joy on her face was matched only by the joy on his. He forgave the debt, she whispered. All of it. We are free. Samuel caught her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing with relief and happiness. When he set her down, he kissed her soundly, pouring all his emotion into it until they were both breathless. He must be a better man than we gave him credit for, Samuel said when they finally pulled apart. To let go of that much money just because it was the right thing to do. Or perhaps he values his reputation more than his money. A forced marriage would have looked terrible for him in Boston society. But Elena did not care about Thornhill's motivations. All that mattered was that the threat was gone, the debt erased, her future her own again. They rode to her house together, and Elena burst through the door calling for her father. He emerged from his study looking haggard and wary, but his expression changed when Elena thrust the letter into his hands. She watched his face as he read, saw disbelief give way to shock, give way to something like shame. When he finished, he sat down heavily, the letter still gripped in his hands. He forgave it, all of it. Her father looked up at her with damp eyes. Why would he do that? Because I told him the truth, because I stood up for myself, because sometimes doing the right thing matters more than money. Elena knelt in front of her father's chair. We get to start over now, both of us, clean slate. I do not deserve this. I do not deserve you. Her father gripped her hands. But I swear to you, Elena, I will be better. I will be the father your mother wanted me to be. No more drinking myself into a stupor. No more desperate schemes. I will find honest work and we will build an honest life. I will hold you to that. Elena squeezed his hands. And Father, there is someone I want you to meet. She brought Samuel inside, and the 2 men shook hands warily. Elena's father looked Samuel up and down, taking in his worn but clean clothes, his calloused hands, his steady gray eyes. You are the one who helped her write that letter, her father said. It was not a question. Yes, sir, though the words were all hers. I just helped put them on paper. You helped my daughter defy me and potentially ruin us." Her father's voice was flat, unreadable. "I helped your daughter claim her own life," Samuel replied calmly. "And as it turned out, that was the right thing for everyone." For a long moment the two men stared at each other. Then, slowly, Elena's father smiled. It was a small, tired smile, but genuine. "You are right, it was." He looked at Elena. "Is this young man courting you?" "He is." Elena moved to stand beside Samuel, and he put his arm around her waist. "And I am courting him right back. I know it is fast, but I love him, Father. I want to build a future with him." Her father nodded slowly. "Then I give you my blessing. Heaven knows I have no right to stand in the way of your happiness after what I nearly did." He extended his hand to Samuel again. "Take care of my daughter, Mr. Wright. She is worth more than all the silver in these mountains." "I know, sir. And I intend to spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of her." The summer passed in a haze of happiness. Elena's father sold the mine to a mining company from Denver, getting enough money to pay off the small remaining debts and have a modest sum left over. He took a job as a clerk in town, steady work that kept him busy and gave him purpose. Elena barely recognized him as the broken man who had tried to trade her for his freedom. He stayed sober, came home at regular hours, and slowly began to resemble the father she remembered from before her mother died. Samuel continued working at the Johnson Ranch, but he spent every free moment with Elena. They rode together in the mountains, picnicked by the river, attended dances in town where they scandalized the gossips by only having eyes for each other. Elena's reputation as the girl who had refused a wealthy husband and chosen a cowboy instead made her something of a local legend, though not everyone approved. She did not care. She had Samuel, and she had her freedom, and that was worth more than any amount of social standing. In September, as the aspens turned gold and the air took on the crisp edge of autumn, Samuel asked her to marry him. They were at their river spot, watching the water flow past in the slanting afternoon light, and he pulled out a simple silver ring that had been his grandmother's. "It is not fancy," he said, suddenly nervous in a way Elena had never seen him before. "And I am not rich, probably never will be, but I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me, Elena?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The ring fit perfectly, sliding onto her finger like it had been made for her. They were married in November in a simple ceremony at the small church in Salida, with her father giving her away and Mrs. Chen crying happily in the front pew. Elena wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and Samuel wore a new suit he had saved 3 months to buy. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her like they were the only two people in the world, and Elena felt her heart might burst from happiness. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy but theirs. Samuel took a job managing horses for a rancher who was expanding his operation, work that paid better and had more stability than regular ranch hand work. Elena started teaching, first just a few children whose parents wanted them to learn reading and mathematics, then more as word spread that she was patient and skilled. Within a year, she had a proper school going, meeting in a room above the general store that Mrs. Chen donated. Within 2 years, the town voted to build a real schoolhouse, and Elena was hired as the official teacher. She taught children of all ages, from 6 to 16, and loved every minute of it. Some of her students were girls who had never imagined they could learn mathematics or science, and watching their faces light up when they understood a concept gave Elena a satisfaction deeper than any wealth could provide. Samuel proved to be everything Elena could have hoped for in a husband. He was kind and patient, funny and thoughtful, and he treated her as a true partner in every decision they made. They talked through everything, from how to budget their money to whether to plant a garden to what color to paint the kitchen. He never made a major decision without consulting her, and he celebrated her successes as a teacher as proudly as if they were his own. In the spring of 1883, Elena realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had lost her own mother and knew how dangerous childbirth could be. But Samuel held her close and promised he would be there every step of the way, and Dr. Morrison assured her that she was healthy and strong and would likely have no trouble. Their son was born in late autumn, a squalling, red-faced baby they named Thomas, after Samuel's father. Holding him for the first time, Elena understood her own father's desperation in a new way. She would do anything to protect this tiny person, would move mountains and fight armies if that was what it took to keep him safe and happy. But she also understood that protecting him meant letting him make his own choices, live his own life, not trying to control every aspect of his future. Elena's father was a devoted grandfather, visiting often to hold Thomas and tell him stories about his grandmother. The years had continued to soften him, to bring back glimpses of the man he had been before grief and failure broke him. Watching him with Thomas, Elena could finally forgive him completely for what he had tried to do. He had been drowning and he had made terrible choices, but he had also found his way back. When Thomas was 2, Elena had a daughter, Rose, named for her mother. Then another son, James, when Rose was 3. Their little house grew crowded and loud with the chaos of children, but Elena had never been happier. Samuel was a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching the children to ride and fish and treat animals with kindness. Elena watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again. The school continued to thrive. Elena hired an assistant teacher to help with the growing number of students, a young woman from Denver who had radical ideas about education that Elena loved. Together they taught not just reading and writing, but also history and science and philosophy. They taught girls that they could aspire to anything, that their dreams were not limited by their gender. Several of Elena's former students went on to become teachers themselves, or businesswomen, or doctors. Elena kept track of them all, proudly following their accomplishments. Years passed in the way that happy years do, feeling both endless and far too short. Thomas grew tall and serious, with his father's gray eyes and his mother's love of books. Rose was wild and free, always climbing trees and catching frogs, determined to become a rancher when she grew up. James was the peacemaker, gentle and kind, mediating between his siblings with a wisdom beyond his years. Elena's father passed away peacefully in his sleep when Thomas was 15. He had stayed sober and steadily employed until the end, and his last words to Elena were an apology and a thank you. She buried him next to her mother on a hillside overlooking the valley, and she did not regret a single choice that had led them to that peace. Samuel's hair turned gray at the temples, and laugh lines deepened around Elena's eyes. They grew older together, still meeting sometimes at the river bend where they had first truly met, still talking for hours about everything and nothing. The passion of their early days mellowed into something deeper and more enduring, a love that had weathered storms and come out stronger. When Elena was 45, she published a book about education reform that was read throughout Colorado and beyond. When Samuel was 50, he became the foreman of the largest ranch in the county, respected by everyone who worked for him. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable. More importantly, they were happy. Thomas married a sweet girl from town and took over management of his grandfather's old property, which had been returned to the family after the mining company went bankrupt. He turned it into a horse ranch, breeding and training horses that became known throughout the state. Rose did indeed become a rancher, partnering with her brother and running the business side with sharp intelligence and fierce determination. James became a doctor, studying in Denver and then returning to Salida to practice, carrying on the tradition of serving his community. Elena and Samuel became grandparents, then great-grandparents. Their house was always full of family, of noise and laughter and love. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Elena back to the river bend and produced a letter he had saved for 3 decades. It was the letter they had written together, the letter to Marcus Thornhill, the letter that had changed everything. "I kept a copy," Samuel explained as Elena read through it with tears in her eyes. "I wanted to remember the day I met the bravest woman I have ever known, the day everything started. I would do it all again," Elena said, folding the letter carefully. "Every choice, every risk, every moment of fear, because it led me to you, and me to you." Samuel pulled her close, and they sat together by the river as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink. On a warm summer evening in 1915, when Elena was 72 and Samuel was 75, they sat together on the porch of their house watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. The world was changing rapidly around them. There was talk of war in Europe, of automobiles replacing horses, of women fighting for the vote. Elena approved of all of it, especially the last. She had spent her life teaching women and girls to stand up for themselves, and now the whole country was beginning to listen. "Do you ever think about how different your life could have been?" Samuel asked, his hand warm in hers. "If you had married Thornhill, if you had gone to Boston." "Sometimes," Elena admitted. "I imagine it would have been comfortable, probably safe, maybe even pleasant in its way." "Do you ever regret choosing this instead?" Elena looked at her husband, at the weathered face she loved more than any other, at the gentle smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. She looked at their grandchildren playing in the grass, at the mountains rising purple in the distance, at the home they had built together from nothing but love and determination. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This life, with you, with our family, with the freedom to make my own choices, this was always the right path. It was always you." Samuel kissed her forehead, a gesture as familiar as breathing after so many years together. "You know what the best part is? We still have time. Still have days ahead of us, still have mornings by the river, still have each other." "That is the best part," Elena agreed. They sat together as the sun sank lower, and the children's laughter rang out across the valley. Two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built a love that had lasted a lifetime. Elena thought about the frightened girl she had been, standing in her father's house reading a letter that tried to steal her future. She thought about the cowboy who had helped her write a letter saying no, who had given her the courage to claim her own life. She thought about how one moment of bravery, one act of defiance, one decision to choose love over security had shaped everything that came after. And she was grateful, endlessly grateful, for every single choice that had led her here. As the stars began to appear overhead and the children were called inside for bed, Elena and Samuel remained on the porch, hand in hand, watching the night settle over the mountains they had always called home. They had started with nothing but hope and love, and they had built a life more rich and full than either of them could have imagined. Their story, born from a letter of refusal and a cowboy's kindness by a river bend, had become a legacy of love that would echo through generations. Their children and grandchildren would tell the story of how great-grandmother Elena had refused to marry a stranger, how great-grandfather Samuel had helped her write the letter that changed everything, how their courage and love had given birth to a family built on choice and freedom, and the unshakable belief that some things, like love and autonomy, were worth any risk. Years later, after both Elena and Samuel had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their great-granddaughter found the letter in Elena's things. The original copy, carefully preserved in a wooden box along with the letter from Marcus Thornhill forgiving the debt. She read them both with wonder, marveling at the courage it must have taken to refuse such an arrangement, to stake everything on the belief that she deserved better. She framed them both and hung them in the schoolhouse that now bore Elena's name, a testament to the power of standing up for yourself, of saying no when something is wrong, of choosing your own path even when it is frightening. Generations of students would read those letters and be inspired by them, by the story of a woman who refused to be property and the man who loved her for it. But on that summer evening in 1915, Elena and Samuel knew none of what was to come. They simply sat together in the twilight, grateful for every day they had been given, every choice that had brought them to this moment. The letter that had started everything was long since yellowed and fragile, but the love it had sparked was as strong as ever, a fire that would burn bright until the very end. And in the end, that was all that truly mattered. Not the house or the mine or the debt or the scandal or any of it. Just two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love worth remembering, a love that would outlast them both and inspire everyone who heard their story. As darkness fell completely and the first coyotes began their evening song in the distant hills, Samuel squeezed Elena's hand and she squeezed back. A conversation without words that they had perfected over 3 decades together. They rose slowly, joints creaking with age but spirits still young, and walked inside their home together, closing the door on another perfect day in a life full of them. The story of the letter, of the refusal, of the cowboy and the woman who chose love over obligation, became the foundation of everything that came after. It was the bedrock on which a family was built, the example that shaped how children were raised, the legend that reminded everyone who heard it that freedom and love were worth fighting for. And somewhere, in a cemetery on a hillside overlooking the Arkansas River, 2 headstones stood side by side, their inscriptions simple but profound. Samuel Wright, devoted husband and father, who taught us that true strength is helping others find their voice. Elena Wright, beloved wife and teacher, who showed us that courage is choosing your own path. Between them, carved into the shared base of their memorial, were the words that had defined their life together, the essence of the letter that had changed everything. I cannot and will not. I choose my own path. I choose love.